Welcome into our first live edition, or live taped edition of Henshaw's House, our first video edition of Henshaw's House. We've been doing the articles at warchant.com for several years. We really appreciate Coach Henshaw sharing his expertise with the readers on the site. Now, people on our YouTube channel can watch as well. This is Coach Henshaw, Coach George Henshaw, who played for Coach Bobby Bowden at West Virginia, then coached with Coach Bowden, then coached with Coach Bowden here in Tallahassee at Florida State. Yeah. Then moved on to be offensive coordinator at Alabama, then a long career in the NFL as an assistant coach and coordinator. And so the articles, if you haven't read them before, it's a lot of times talking about what's going on with Florida State football, but sometimes relating it back to your career and your experiences. So thanks for joining us.
Well, I appreciate it. I always enjoy Florida State football, and it's meant a lot to me over the years, so glad to be here.
So, and we're here at Garnet and Gold. We're at the Garnet and Gold. They have 3 locations. There's one on campus, the one by Governor Square Mall, and then this one here at Village Commons. So we appreciate Garnet and Gold for having us out here. So, Coach, I wanted to, for the people that on the YouTube audience who haven't been reading your articles, I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about your career and when you went to play for Coach Bowden and then going into coaching for Coach Bowden. When did you first meet Bobby Bowden?
Well, I met Coach Bowden when I was in high school. Okay. They had changed coaches at West Virginia after my senior year in high school, and Jim Carlin became the head coach, and Coach Bowden was the offensive coordinator. He had come from Florida State to come to West Virginia. Oh, okay. And he came down to Virginia. I was born and raised right outside of Richmond, in a little town called Midlothian, and so I went to West Virginia. Coach Bowden recruited me to come to West Virginia, and I was his first recruit.
No kidding.
To be able to sign with West Virginia, and so I played for 4 years there. Really, I played for 3. You couldn't play as a freshman there. I can remember going into his office after I had finished playing. We had just won the Peach Bowl and beaten South Carolina at that particular time. And so I went to ask him if I could be a graduate assistant. And I was expecting him to say, sure, man, we would love to have you as a graduate assistant.
Well, first, just to let people know, you're in the Hall of Fame at West Virginia. You weren't just any player.
Well,
you were a very successful player.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. But anyway, I went in and asked him. I said, hey, Coach, can I be a graduate assistant? I'm expecting him to say, yeah, come on. I'd love for you to be a GA. He says, well, I tell you what we'll do. He says, you go out there and help the defensive line coach this spring, and then you help in the weight room. Back then, the coaches had to do everything.
Right.
So anyway, he says, I'll evaluate you at the end of spring, and then I'll let you know then whether you can come and be a graduate assistant. So as usual, that was something that it was not going to be given to you.
Right.
You had to earn it. So after a few years, I became the freshman coach. And then after that, I became a defensive line coach. And then I can remember my wife had her brother. He was at West Virginia. He came in as a freshman in 1975. So back then, we were figuring on staying at West Virginia. Well, Coach Bowden, he came to Florida State. He's coming to Florida State. So first person he asks, he comes in and says, George, I want you to go with me. So I go home and tell my wife, I said, Coach Bowden wants us to go to Florida State. She says, oh, no, we can't go to no Florida State. Wow, we went to school here in West Virginia. My brother's a freshman here. We can't go. I said, well, let's just think about it. I said, I think Coach Bowden says that I should go. So anyway, the next day, he asked me again. He says, hey, you need to come. I said, man, Kathy doesn't want to go. I said, I want to go, but she doesn't want to go. So anyway, I go home and I talk to Kathy, and I say, Kathy, I said, why don't we do this? I was making $10,000 a year. And I said, I'm going to go in and I'm going to ask for just an astronomical amount of money, $20,000.
Right.
Okay. And if he says go, will you go? She said, oh, yeah, I'll go. I'll go for that. So anyway, I go in. Now, you have to remember with Coach Bowden, there was never a contract. No contracts. It was word of mouth. Your word was your bond.
Right.
That was it. So I go in and I say, Coach, I want to come, but Kathy doesn't want to come. But she said, if you offered me $20,000, that she would go. He says, okay. He says, looks like you coming. That was it. So we came down and anyway, it was great. I was the defensive line coach at that particular time. And lucky enough, a year after that, then all of a sudden, here comes Ron Simmons in, and you're able to coach him.
Wow.
And I can remember we brought him in as a linebacker. He was a great linebacker in high school. And I can remember that we had some good linebackers back then. We had Paul Porowski,
right.
Reggie Herring, those guys were linebackers, and they really knew what they were doing. Besides being outstanding players,
right.
they were smart players. So anyway, I can remember us coming into the coach's office, and Jack Stanton says, well, he says, I think Ron Simmons be a good second-team linebacker, but he doesn't know the system yet. So Coach Bowden, he gets up on the board, and he has a gentle way of getting his way. He says, guys, he said, when I recruited Ron Simmons, I told him he was going to start his first game.
Wow.
So here's how we're going to do things. You can put Ron Simmons wherever you want to, but he's going to be out there. And you can put 10 other guys out there with him.
Yeah.
You decide where I get to choose one. The rest of y'all defensive coaches, y'all get to choose the other 10. So we put him at nose tackle, and
Worked out pretty good.
obviously he was a great player here. And here's the thing. When he walked on campus, Ira, he was better than everybody. The day one that he walked on campus, he was the best football player on the field.
So a lot of people talk about that class that came in a little bit later with Odell and Dion and all those guys. But Ron Simmons really was the guy before.
Yes,
that.
he was the guy that, at least in my mind, that turned the program around. He was a phenomenal player, and everybody played, really well around him. But he was a difference maker now, big time, as a college player. And then from there, I can remember when I came down here, Coach Bowden told me, he says, I will not make you a coordinator. You're not ready to be a coordinator. But the next coordinator that I have, if you do a good job, I'll make you the coordinator. So what he's thinking is that we had Jack Stanton, who was the defensive coordinator, and he was a guy that, moved around from school to school. All right, and he figured that Jack would be here for a couple of years and then leave. And George Hafner was from Johnny Majors at Iowa State and at Pitt, and he was more stable and everything. Well, after the 1978 season, George Hafner he gets mad because we were 8-3 and didn't get a bowl game. So he got mad and left and went to Texas A&M. And so the day that he walked out the door, Coach Bowden calls me in his office. He says, "You ready to be offensive coordinator?" I'd never coached offense a day in my life, but it was Coach Bowden's offense.
Right.
And your job was to organize the offense and to make sure that the coaches taught the offense the way that Coach Bowden wanted it done.
Right.
So that's it. But that's part of somebody that gives you their word,
Right.
and they come through. It means something to you.
Right.
So Coach Bowden got a lot of, people criticized him some for that, for hiring me to be his offensive coordinator. But luckily, the first year we went 11-0, and all of a sudden the criticism left.
Yeah, people backed off.
Yeah, but anyway, it was not. Don't get me.
Yeah.
It was not my. I was learning from Coach Bowden,
Right.
and I was smart enough to understand that I could take directions, and whatever he asked me to do, I was going to do. I was going to coach it the way he wanted it done.
So, and then from there, you become offensive coordinator at Alabama.
Yeah, and I would have never left here, except for Coach Bowden. Mm-hmm. Coach Bowden told me from the time I got into coaching, he said, George, if you ever get a chance to coach at Alabama, you ought to do it. Mm-hmm. So I can remember, this is after Coach Bryant had finished there, and Ray Perkins became the head coach. And so Ray Perkins calls me and asks me if I'd be interested. I said, yeah, I would be interested, but you got to call Coach Bowden. Mm-hmm. So he calls Coach Bowden. Coach Bowden comes down to my office. He said, Ray Perkins just called. He said, you can go up there, but I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to like it. So anyway, I said, okay. So he let me go up there, and then I ended up going there. And that was a great experience now.
Yeah.
When you coach at Alabama, that's different now. Okay. And then from there, I became the head coach at Tulsa for 1 year. Mm. After 1 year, Dan Reeves calls me and wants me to come and be the line coach out at Denver. Okay. Because the line coach, Alex Gibbs, left with Mike Shanahan to go and be the head coach of the Raiders.
Right.
So I went out there for 5 years, and we were lucky. We went to the Super Bowl 1 year. Then from there to the Giants for 4 years with Coach Reeves. And then from there to the Titans for 9 years with Jeff Fisher. And we were lucky enough to go to the Super Bowl again.
Yeah.
And then I didn't coach for then I went from there to
Saints.
Sean Payton.
Yeah.
Called me and wanted me to come down there. So Sean was just getting into the Saints. So I went down there and was lucky enough to get with Deuce. I was a running back coach then with Deuce McAllister and Reggie Bush and those guys. So we had some great success there. Then I was out for a little bit. Then I came back. Mike Munchak called me back to go up there to
Tennessee,
the Titans. So I went back up for a year. Then back to Tallahassee. So anyway, then David Colburn asked me to come out and see if I could help some and be a kind of a consultant type guy, analyst you might say, with Willie Taggart, and that was wonderful. Really, it was. They treated me great, and that was a trying time in the program because Jimbo had just left, and there were challenges big time around the program. And then when Coach Norvell came in the first year or so, I did that with him, and obviously he's great. So
the articles you write for the site a lot of times will talk about what's going on with the team, and obviously the articles we did last year were a lot more positive than the articles we're doing right now. But one of the things, looking at this game against Clemson for Florida State, we talked about, they're going to try a new quarterback out. You're trying to, it's a big task. Clemson's favored by more than a couple touchdowns. But one of the things you talked about in the article was back when you were at West Virginia, the upset you guys had against Pitt 1 year, and I was wondering if you could share that.
Yes, it was 1975, I remember. They were coming to our place in Morgantown, and we just had a bunch of just good guys that would go out there and bust it to play. I mean, we didn't have a bunch of pros out there on our team. They had Tony Dorsey. They had a team that was good enough.
And I was going to say, at Pitt at the time, for people that weren't alive or watching football at that time, Pitt was the program. I mean, they had NFL guys on the sideline.
Pitt would be the equivalent today of Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. I mean, they are loaded with pro. I mean, they had talent galore.
They didn't have scholarship limits, so they could sign
Yes.
as many guys as they wanted.
Right, they did, and they would run them off. Johnny Majors and Jackie Sherrill was an assistant there, and they run off a bunch of guys. And Pitt would go out there and sign 50 guys,
right.
and run off a bunch of them. But they had a heck of a program.
Yeah.
And but yet we were lucky enough to go out there. We were much more underdogs than 14 and a half points.
Right.
And the reality of it is, Ira, 14 and a half points seems like a lot of points, but almost every week somebody beats another team where they are an underdog by
Right.
2 or 3 touchdowns sometimes.
Right.
And so that's the optimism that I have for this weekend, because I believe that we have underachieved. I think that if you went and asked Coach Norvell or any of the players, they would sit there and say, we are a lot better than what we've shown. Well, I heard a wonderful coach say, no, you're not better than what you've shown.
Right.
You are what you've shown until you show us something different.
Right.
And what I'm hoping, and I've been hoping the entire year, is that we will see something that is totally different than what we've seen in the last, all 5 games. We've played 5 teams that we have better talent than any of those 5 teams. That will not be the case Saturday night, because Clemson's they've got some players. They've done a good job there, but they are certainly not one of those teams that's unbeatable.
Right. And you've been part of plenty of upsets. We were focused on that one from 1975 when you guys 17-14 you upset Pitt. But do you remember? Was there a belief in the players? Because that's what I wonder sometimes when you start losing. How do you get that belief in the?
Yeah, I think that the coaches did a good job, and I was lucky enough to be one of those guys, and they did a good job. Coach Bowden did of telling them that you've got to do it not right, but exactly right in this game, or we have no chance to win. And so for the West Virginia people, the Pitt game is like the Florida game down here. So that was a huge game, and so we as a coaching staff, mainly Coach Bowden, he drilled into the players' head of doing things exactly right, and if you did that, we would have a chance to win. And I believe just like this week, what happens is you almost have to break the game down into 4 quarters and sit there and say, okay, look, let's play the first quarter. Let's win the first quarter, and that's it. Don't worry about the second quarter, third, fourth, just the first quarter. Let's win that one. And what happens is the longer it goes and the tighter it gets, the pressure goes to them, big time. If this game gets into the 4th quarter and it's tight, let me tell you now, there are going to be some tight guys on that other sideline trying to figure out what in the world is going on, because this group of guys that are out there right now, that's not what we saw on film.
But the other point you made is, as talented as some of these guys are at Florida State, you need to see the physicality. The physicality is probably the biggest thing.
Oh yeah, that's the biggest thing. Is that football is an interesting game. Sometimes we try to complicate it a lot more than what it really is. If you are not the most physical team out there on Saturday, you don't deserve to win. And if you're not the most disciplined team, you don't deserve to win. Okay? So, and if you don't give great effort, you don't deserve to win. That's why it's been so rewarding the last 2 years, because you can look out there and see what it's supposed to look like.
Right.
But it's totally different. And I guess the biggest thing that kind of gets to me is I just cannot comprehend a guy putting on that garnet and gold jersey and going out there on that field and not being excited about playing and giving it everything he's got. That has nothing to do with talent.
Right.
That is just want to.
We had a couple of questions on the message boards on the tribal council that I wanted to ask you. One was a user named C. Pelham asked, why don't college football teams practice tackling anymore? And if we don't in college football anymore, what are things they can do to teach the physicality and toughness that sometimes seems lacking?
Well, I think that it's more of the mental toughness than the physical toughness. Because sometimes if you don't have a lot of depth, now this team has got depth, but they're not playing as good as they can play. But the coaches go and teach. They have tackling drills. They just don't tackle them all the way to the ground.
Right.
That's the difference. But they teach angles. They teach wrap up. They teach all the things that you used to, except you don't take them and throw them on the ground. Well, when I was coaching, I mean, if you had a tackling drill, you went out there and took the third team and fourth team guys, and it was misery for them because they will go out there, they will get tackled, and they will get tackled all the way to the ground. And but you really don't have to do that. I mean, the bottom line, there are some really good tackling teams in the country, and they don't go out there and tackle guys all on the ground either.
And that probably started in the NFL, probably.
It started in NFL, yes, where you don't want to get guys hurt, and so and colleges can learn from the NFL about the tackling, but it's to me, tackling is about 80 to 90% want to. If I want to tackle you, I can do it if I really want to.
Right.
But what happens is guys are not totally into it, and they conveniently get themselves blocked instead of getting off the block, and then not jogging to the ball or kind of loping to the ball, but I'm talking about sprinting to the ball with a mean attitude, and when you get there, I mean, the thing you want to do, I heard this from Marshawn Lynch. He said somebody asked him, he says, why do you, as tough a runner as you are, how come you don't get hurt? He said, well, my mother told me that if I was running the ball, that somebody was going to be the attack person and somebody was going to catch it.
Right.
And he says, you go and you attack them and you deliver pain to that defensive player, and you won't get hurt. Well, that's what we have to do. We would call it back then, and Mickey did it all the time too. He's a great coach, as you know. Yeah. And we would call them knock-em-backs. Whenever you hit the runner, then the other guys would have to come in and be able to knock the guy back. Well, you do that 30 times in a game, all right, all of a sudden, instead of them getting 2 or 3 yards every time, now that's 60 or 70 more yards. That once you got hit, you were going backwards. You were not going to go forward. Yeah,
Coach Andrews, they actually had a statistic for it and would track them, how many knockbacks each player had. It's funny, also Ernie Sims is now an analyst with the team.
Yes.
And I was watching him doing a drill yesterday, and he was telling the linebackers when they came around to hit the ball carrier that it should be like a shotgun blast. Like he wanted them to, really explode into it, which, we probably haven't seen enough this season.
Right. And you need to go for the ball. I mean, the first guy goes for the tackle, the next guys go for the ball, because the reality of it is, if you want to get fumbles, cause fumbles.
Right.
Go out there and if you put your helmet on that ball enough times, that it'll come out.
Right. Next question we have was from a user named Cannoli. That's obviously not the real name, but they know you. They said, Coach, you were my favorite Sunday school teacher. 45 years ago, when they were 9 years old and the Noles were 11-0. That was probably the season you were talking about. If you could pick any Seminole quarterback ever to start a big game in which they were underdogs, who would you pick and why? If there's a quarterback that, knowing you're an underdog, you'd want that guy to give you your best chance to win.
Well, I would say now I was not here when he was here, okay, but I would have a hard time not picking Charlie Ward,
Right. Right.
okay, because he's just gonna figure out how to beat you somehow or another. Now, when I was here, we were lucky. If you want to understand why Florida State was good when we were here, well, we had Wally Woodham, all right, we had Jimmy Jordan, we had Rick Stockstill, and all three of them are in the FSU Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Now, and I'm sure that Jordan Travis will be in the Hall of Fame one day.
Right.
All right. Well, if you want to have a heck of a football team, get you a quarterback that's going to be in the FSU Hall of Fame.
That's a good solution.
That gives you a good shot to be able to win big games.
Right. Right. Watching Charlie, though, there was the whole thing, and you were in the NFL at the time when he was coming out of college, and it's just amazing to think that people wondered if you could be a Charlie Ward type of quarterback and play at the NFL, and now you see Lamar Jackson and a bunch of other guys.
See, I think Charlie Ward would be better today than he was back then.
Wow.
Because he was an outstanding runner and thrower and smart.
Right.
And you take those things, and there were some quarterbacks that played a while back that would be better today than they were then.
Right.
And he would be one, and I mean,
he could be like a Patrick Mahomes, I think.
yes, he could be. Oh, I don't know about that now. Let's don't go that far now, Charlie.
I think he could.
Okay, but anyway, he would be outstanding. Right. Okay, in other words, I mean, this guy was down the road. I know people don't want to talk about him up here, but let me tell you, as good as Tim Tebow was then, if Tim Tebow played today, he would be better than he was then, and he won the Heisman Trophy.
Right.
And there's Charlie.
Yeah, because they've figured out how to use those guys.
Yeah, people have figured out how to use the running and the throwing today even more.
Well, that's good stuff. Last thing, I guess, just looking at this game, what's the one thing, Florida State and Clemson, like what's one thing if you see it, because the season is what it is, they're 1-4.
Yeah.
They're not going to get in the playoff and all that, but like what would you walk away from Saturday's game feeling like, okay, you're starting to see some progress?
Effort.
That's it.
If I see great effort out there, because when you give great effort, good things are going to happen. And I would want to see outstanding effort and discipline, with our football team. And really, I really don't when I watch the game, I really don't pay any attention to the score, because the reality of it is you ought to play every play, separate, and learn from what you've done, and then go forward. Now, when I start looking at the scoreboard, there's about 4 or 5 minutes to go in the game, because the score means something then.
Right.
But really, before then, if you're a player, what difference does it make what the score is?
You still got to play that play.
You got to play that play, and now that's a little bit different for the quarterback, because the quarterback needs to know situations. Now you do have to know down and distance and all of those things, but as far as the score is concerned, that score doesn't make a bit of difference to me till you get right to the end of a game.
And if you're watching the game, and you see the effort and you see the physicality, it doesn't matter. That's just what you want to see.
That's what I want to see. I'm not even concerned, about the score on the thing, because the score, if you go out there and you out hit them and you out discipline them, the score will take care of itself.
Right. Good stuff. Well, thanks, Coach Henshaw. I appreciate it. And we'll have another one of these hopefully soon. Thanks to Garnet and Gold for having us out. And thanks for Ben behind the camera. Thanks, Coach Henshaw. And thanks for you guys for watching. And we'll talk to you next time on Henshaw's House.